Argylle is directed by Matthew Vaughn and stars Bryce Dallas Howard, Sam Rockwell, Henry Cavill, and among others. And in this story, it deals with Bryce Dallas Howard's character, who's a writer of spy novels, and she basically creates a series of novels that feature this spy called Argylle. And essentially, she gets caught into a real-world type of espionage where she teams up with Sam Rockwell along the way in order to pretty much go on a mission that I can't go into spoilers with because there's a lot of stuff in this film that I can't even really talk about because of the plot. But essentially, it has some liberties that, from what I've heard, take some inspiration from movies like Romance in the Stone, where you have pretty much a writer that gets caught in real-life adventures and stuff. Now, here's a little backstory. Now, this movie was directed by Matthew Vaughn, who I've actually become a really good avid fan over the years as a director, especially when he's done movies like Kick-Ass, the Kingsman movies, and also X-Men First Class. And I really enjoy a lot of his style with a lot of what he brought with the Kingsman films, mainly the first two. And it really feels like it's one of those kind of movies going into the trailers that it was kind of giving me similar vibes. But I kind of also had a feeling of what the plot was doing because I'm not going to go into detail, but there's some stuff in this film that is kind of really like it's kind of a misleading from the trailers because it really is feeling more about Bryce Dallas Howard and Sam Rockwell's characters, and that's really the whole purpose of what the movie was going for. And going into it, I kind of just figured it was going to be like one of those kind of fun type of movies that we see that is taking the spy genre and taking, kind of what Vaughn did with the Kingsman films, but kind of also doing some other things to go a little bit more on the meta aspect, so to speak. And after upon seeing the film, I can say that while it was a decent film, there was some big issues I had as far as writing and plot-wise and some other stuff that do kind of bring the movie back quite a bit. That doesn't really keep it from being, that keeps it from really being great like I really thought it would be. So I can say that I wasn't necessarily disappointed, but there were some things I was very underwhelmed by that I think really held the film back to its advantage. But to get my pros out of the way, I thought the cast in this were all fantastic. I thought Bryce Dallas Howard and Sam Rockwell were really great in this. Their chemistry was very fantastic, and a lot of they're kind of playing against type 2, where you have Sam Rockwell playing pretty much the badass who's trying to basically protect Howard throughout the film, and you have Howard who's pretty much, being a writer that's really caught up in the whole situation. And they really pull it their all, and they really have a great timing together, a great comedic timing together. And their chemistry, I thought, was really fantastic the way it plays along. And it also has some really stuff that I really got into their genuine love for each other as the film goes along with. And then the rest of the cast is great too. Henry Cavill and John Cena, they're also great. And this is kind of becoming a thing that I'm going to just address because it actually has become established at this point. It's not a spoiler or anything, but don't expect too much of Henry Cavill and John Cena because they're barely in it. But when they are on screen, they're pretty fun to watch. And the same goes for the rest of the cast. It's great seeing, some ones that I knew that were going into it, like Samuel L. Jackson, Bryan Cranston, Catherine O'Hara. All the cast in this are all fantastic, and they really bring it to their own, charm and everything that I wanted to see how the movie, that I expected to see in the movie. And the way that the plot also goes in the whole meta aspect, I was very interested in because there is some really good spins on the stuff that it takes in some funny parts that is poking fun of the stuff that we get in a lot of spy novels and other various forms of media and stuff that I enjoyed. And there are certain scenes where things are playing out exactly that are pretty much having action scenes that are pretty much being mirrored from the actual novels as it's going along and stuff. And so I thought that was really cool. And then the action scenes, I'm hit and miss with, but to the positives, I will say they are very well done with some of the fight scenes and some of the sequences that take place, especially when it comes to some of the scenes later when you have, from the trailers, you have that smoke scene where they're using tear gas and things like that. Not only did I think it was really well shot, but the way it was also played, choreographed and things like that, and the music and everything just really is what I really wanted to have fun with. And I can really say that this movie just has a lot of really fun going for it, to its advantage that, does overstay its welcome a little too much toward the end. But for the most part, I was still entertained by it. And that's the really big thing with this movie, is that I accept that it is a flawed film, but I still had fun with, for the most part. And then on top of that, the soundtrack is also great too, especially hearing some, typical tunes that you would hear with these kind of films. And Surprisingly enough, they actually did have a song in this that was actually the Beatles' recent song that that was released called "Now and Then." That I thought really played into good use and actually did have a genuine connection with the actual plot line as a plot point throughout the film that they used the music for. And so I thought that was not only very, really great to hear in the theater, but it was also really emotional because I'll be honest that it's great to at least hear a newly released Beatles song these days that not only really, I think really still sounds really great, but also really gets me on a very emotional level every time I hear it. It's a very sad song. It's a very sad song, but it also plays really well in context-wise the plot. And now this is kind of where I shift into some of my cons. And as much fun as I was having with the film, it does get into some stuff that I have to really get into that really holds the movie back quite a bit, and that is with the writing. Now, I was actually really going along with the movie for about the first like 2/3 of it and seeing how the plot goes into gear and stuff. But one of the biggest things that really holds it back for me the most is a lot of the constant reveals and twists that keep coming back and forth and back and forth. And I think the problem with a lot of movies nowadays that I've seen is that when you're trying to basically cram so much story and stuff and trying to also really overstay its welcome, it gets to a point it really runs out of gears after a while. And with it trying to also do plot after plot twist, it makes it feel like I'm not really buying certain things that go into it because it also doesn't really fully explore a lot of stuff that much, and you only get like quick backstories here and there with. There's a couple of things that they reveal in the film that I thought were interesting and was to its advantage, I liked. But there's also some other stuff that it gets into that I really question the longevity behind it. And I know this is kind of one of those films that you're not really meant to take too serious with, but the way that the movie just keeps constantly keep going along with, especially toward the third act, it really makes it really feel like there's really too much it's to its advantage that, it overstayed its welcome on having too many twists and turns that I really feel like were not earned for some of the other ones that come in. And one of my biggest issues I have with the film is that there's some great action sequences that take place, but then there's some other ones where the CGI is just really the CGI in this is really awful too at parts. This is a film that, from what I read, cost $200 million, and I heard that supposedly that mainly has to do with how it was sold to Apple TV and stuff for like the distribution and things like that from whatever they did. But I could also see where the budget went to, especially with the actors and stuff, and a lot of the other stuff in the production. But you're telling me that a film like this, it really seems like there should have been a lot more better CGI. And this is the problem I have when you're releasing a lot of blockbuster nowadays that really struggle when trying to render it. Especially the scenes with this cat that is named Alfie in the movie. That I thought every time he was on screen, it really seemed like I was watching Alice in Wonderland with the Chester cat and stuff, the Tim Burton version and stuff. It didn't literally look rendered too well. On top of that, some of even the regular action scene itself, you can tell that some of them do look like they're on a green screen at times, and it really does look cringe quite a bit. Not quite the insane like it was with Expendables 4, where it was literally on a green screen the entire time for most of the film. Now, there is some really good action in the film, but there's a lot of them where you can tell if you really look at it, a lot of it looks really out of place. And speaking of the action, there are some action scenes, and there's a couple action scenes and plot points in this film that also reminded me of better films that I think that the movie either ripped off or could have, or really didn't do it properly if they were trying to do a spin on it. And that's some stuff I can't go into spoilers with, but it reminds me of better films I could be watching in some of those scenes. On top of that, it just really feels like the movie doesn't need to be over 2 hours. I think that if they would have cut down maybe 20 or 30 minutes or so, it could have really had a more better pace the way it plays out. Because once it gets to about like the second half, it does slow down and it gets into some stuff that I was really kind of predicting where it was going to after a while. And it really seems like it could have had a lot better way of not trying to overstuff things too much. And I think the biggest comparison I can really see this being is probably with movies like the original Casino Royale from 1967, in that it's a film that, much like that film, where there's so much happening in the film, and it just goes batshit crazy and stuff, and it's a lot of style and a lot of comedic stuff that's trying to be basically a parody of the genre. But much like that film, while there is a lot of funny parts I really enjoyed, and there's some really stuff that I had fun with and things I was really getting into, it just seems like it overstayed its welcome too much. One of the things that did also, I think, really got it interesting too is there's something that they also reveal toward the mid of the credits that I found myself very interested in and where it's going, and that did at least, help it go up a little. And so with that, I'm going to give the movie just an average Joe on the Film Freaks meter. It definitely has its issues, and I can totally see that this movie is not for everyone. And to its advantage, I can recognize all the flaws that it does have, but since I still had fun with it somewhat at times, and I still, give it credit for where it was doing, it still has me interested on where it could go. But if this doesn't really become anywhere because the way the movie's not doing too well in theaters, I won't be surprised if this is just a one and done kind of movie. For those of you who have also seen Argylle, let me know in the comments what you thought about it. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next review. I'll see you later.